Now, for a lot of people, I think board games are an inherently competitive activity, right? You're trying to eliminate the other players, score the most amount of points, beat them in some sort of race, and that can create a big mental block for people who just don't like direct competition or conflict. And that's where I think the beauty of cooperative games comes in. Hi, Jared with Board Game Apprentice here, and a cooperative game, or co-op for short, is any game where all the players are on the same team trying to accomplish a shared goal. They could be trying to cure a disease or go into a dungeon, or in our case, defeat old monsters. That kind of sense of cooperation and not being in direct competition with anyone leads to a lot of friendly gameplay. At its best, you feel that sense of camaraderie that you might get on a group project where everyone pulls their weight, or at its worst, you have a person who is quarterbacking and managing and micromanaging your turn and telling you exactly what to do. But we'll get to some strategies on how to avoid that later on. But in general, it's much less intimidating to be on a team of people rather than competing with someone who might be more familiar and know the better strategies. It can sometimes really turn people off when it feels like they're playing something and not really competitive in it. So that's one of the biggest benefits that I find using a cooperative game like Horrified to introduce people to gaming. I do want to mention a game that you're going to see on tons of lists about modern board gaming, cooperative or otherwise, and it's very, very commonly recommended, and that's the 2008 release Pandemic, released by Matt Leacock. And that is a game that has really set the standard for modern cooperative games. And the core mechanic of Pandemic has been used in so many games, including Horrified. And really that beauty of Pandemic is the simple system of having, something bad happen, and then having the players take a turn, and then having something bad happen, so on and so forth. And that ebb and flow of a kind of escalating tension and stress in the game that really drives it to an exciting end. And Pandemic really founded that and has been used in a lot of games. And in Horrified's case, right, you are going to have your player characters doing something, and then the monsters moving around the board and doing something. And I think it's a wonderful system and it's well implemented in Horrified, but I think there's a couple of things that Horrified does that, in my opinion, makes it a little bit more of an enjoyable cooperative experience, especially with people who are new players. Now, Horrified, that was released in 2019 and designed by Prospero Hall, and its sequel, Horrified American Monsters, that was released in 2021, both share the same mechanics. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on the original Horrified rather than the American Monsters, just because I find that the type of things you're fighting in Horrified, your Draculas, your werewolf, your Frankenstein, your mummy, are just a little bit more easy for people to connect to than the Ozark Howler or the Jersey Devil or some of these more regional cryptids that aren't quite in the the cultural zeitgeist as much as these universal monsters are. So as far as an aspect of theming to get people into the game, I find that Horrified, the original, works just a little bit better. And especially how faithful it feels to those old movies. A lot of the supporting characters and a lot of the way these characters look are very much influenced by those old Bela Lugosi or Boris Karloff monsters who, those actors who portrayed them. And a lot of the side characters who come into the game that you have to rescue are characters ripped right out of those movies. So if you have anyone who's an old school movie buff, they're going to really appreciate a lot of the little touches that Horrified has. And that it really didn't need to make, but I do like how faithful it feels to the universal monsters that it uses and that you're going up against. But a game does not survive on aesthetics alone. Does the backbone and gameplay of Horrified promote itself in a way that supports that kind of cooperative spirit? And I think it has a few key things that it does. The first thing is that every player is going to have a different character they select at the start of the game. Now this character is going to determine how many actions they can do on their turn, as well as what special action they can take. This can range from picking up items from other locations, or teleporting anywhere on the map, or moving onto the monster's location, and a couple of other things in between that. But I think this is important to do in a good cooperative game because it gives every player their own sense of uniqueness and that they can all contribute to the team in a different way. I think it's important to set those players apart and give everyone their own niche that they can fill, and that's something that I think Horrified does pretty well. Now the other important aspect to a cooperative game, since of course you're not playing against other players, is the difficulty and challenge. And I think the way Horrified does it is just beautifully simple. You're going to have 6 monsters you can select from, and depending on how difficult you want it, you can just add in more or less monsters. Usually 2 to 3 is the sweet spot, but you can keep ramping it up if you get more familiar with the game and learn strategies for different monsters. I think that scaling, that sliding scale of difficulty is incredible. If you're playing with younger people who are less familiar, or just people who've never played the game before, you can go up against 1 or 2 and it's going to be simple and you can give them a taste of the game, and then you can ramp up that difficulty in your subsequent games. But I think the difficulty in Horrified, and this is a slight negative maybe, sometimes you can get very unlucky with the monster actions you draw early on, and you may have no way to defend yourself, and it can feel really cruddy when you get stuck in a location or someone spawns and they immediately get knocked out, and this is really nothing you could have done against it. Now, the way you lose the game is by having villagers who show up get knocked out, or having your own hero get knocked out, and you're going up this terror track. And once the terror track gets all the way to the top, you automatically lose. The other way you can lose is if you go through the entire monster deck, so if you take too long to finish the game. Now, I think both of these work really well. I think in addition to difficulty being important, the sense of urgency and stress in a cooperative game is important. And I think that as you have new villagers you have to rescue show up, as you have the monsters moving around doing their special abilities, a lot of good things in the game add to that stress and gives the players a clear focus on what they're trying to do. I think those are both very important things in a cooperative game. And now the third, and I think most important thing that a cooperative game has to have, is a variety of challenge. What are the different things that the team is working to accomplish? On a high level, the main goal is to defeat these monsters. But I think the genius of Horrified is the different mini games you're playing to defeat those monsters, and they add a lot of cool variety to every game that you're going to play. Now, the way that you're going to defeat these monsters is by moving your character around the map, collecting different items of 3 different colors and values, different number values, and using those items to advance or move the kind of progress bar that you need to do to defeat each of these monsters. Let's pause for a second, look at 2 of these monsters that I think are a great example of the type of variety you see in this game and how it contributes to that idea of having a team work together towards a specific goal. Now, 2 of my personal favorites are the Mummy, and this guy has almost like a little brain teaser puzzle where you're going to have the numbers 1 through 6 on these little scarab tokens, and they're going to be randomly placed on this little grid here. And when you spend one of the yellow items, you're able to move it 1 spot per power. And so you're going to be able to slide it 1 spot, and your goal is to get all of the numbers matching into their corresponding locations. The trick here is that when the Mummy attacks and rolls his little exclamation attack die, you're going to flip the lowest scarab face down. And so it's going to be tricky if he gets a lot of those exclamation points to remember where on the grid was the 1, where was the 2. And so sometimes it's fun to assign someone and say, okay, your job for the game is to keep track of which of those numbers is in which location. And so I think that this is a good example of the type of challenge that each of these monsters proposes. Of course, after you solve that little puzzle, you have to get a bunch of weapons to defeat them. That's a little less interesting, but again, that's something you might have one person collecting red items so that once this puzzle is done, the other person can swoop in and defeat it. Let's look at one more example here, which is the Wolfman, which in my opinion is one of the toughest, maybe only second to Frankenstein. And he's really tough because his attack die, in addition to any normal attacks he might get, if he gets an exclamation point, he's going to attack every person in the Wolfman space. So if you have multiple civilians or multiple heroes who can't defend themselves, you're going to be going up 2, maybe 3 spots on the terror track, and that is really, really harsh. His kind of puzzle to defeat him is a little simpler than the Mummy, where you are trying to get blue items of 1, 2, and 3 value, and you need sets of each of those in order to make the cure to be able to help the Wolfman. Of course, similarly to the Mummy, you're going to be getting 6 red items to actually defeat them after you get the cure. But again, this kind of leads, one person maybe wants to focus on protecting those civilians, or maybe getting a lot of items and just trying to defend and soak hits from the Wolfman, so he isn't running around and just ravaging everyone on the team. So these 2 are both really good examples of, okay, your job is to kite the Wolfman, try to keep him away from us. Your job is to solve the Mummy's puzzle and remember where those different scarabs are. And it's this type of variety in the gameplay that I think really lends itself to really pro-cooperative gameplay. Now I really think those three things, right? The unique character abilities, the scaling difficulty, adjusting it to who you're playing it with, and the different variety and challenge that those monsters pose depending on what you're playing against really lend itself to cooperative gameplay. But there is one gremlin, one bugaboo in all cooperative games, and that is the idea of the quarterbacker, the backseat gamer, the alpha gamer, whatever you want to call it. And that is the person who maybe knows the game better than everyone else and might influence or try to push the new players into a certain direction. It's extremely frustrating. I would say that if you're playing a cooperative game with people who are new to it and you see them making suboptimal moves, unless they're asking you, just stay quiet. Don't butt in. It might lead to you guys losing the game. It might let Frankenstein and the bride, get to each other and rip that terror track up. But really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If you're playing a cooperative game, you want to try to incorporate everybody. And if you want to help those people, the best thing you can do is talk out loud while you're doing your turn. What is your thought process of why you're doing what you're doing? And kind of leave it to them to make those connections, because I think that's one of the most rewarding parts in a game, cooperative or otherwise. But really resist the urge to tell people what to do in their turn, even if you notice them doing something less than optimally. Unless they're asking for help, and then, of course, swoop in and be as productive and helpful as possible. But really, and if you see someone doing that and you notice someone's kind of alpha gamering you, just say, I'm trying to figure it out myself, it's my first time playing, and don't be afraid to kind of stick up for yourself and let yourself kind of learn the game. And if that person is really being a jerk about it, they kind of knew when they were teaching someone new to the game what they were getting into. A careful balancing act, right? Trying to help people win this shared goal without just playing every role by yourself, which kind of sucks all the fun out of the game. So that's just some of the really great things I love about Horrified. It's really easily accessible in Target, so if this game sounded interesting to you, please go and get it. I really, really love it. I think it's a solid cooperative game and game in general, and I love the horror theme. I notice I have a running theme here of talking about horror games, I guess, but gravitate towards what I like. Looking for some more variety. Like I said, the American Monsters, it has the same getting items, using those items to defeat monsters. It's just a whole new suite of monsters with different challenges. I think it's a little more advanced, the monsters in that game. So if you're more familiar with co-op games, I think the American Monsters is the way to go. But if you're looking for a more introductory type game, the original is the way to go. As far as other cooperative games, I mentioned it before, but you can't go wrong Pandemic. It's a very, I guess, worldly theme right now of, saving the world from a disease. I really enjoy back here Atlantis Rising, which is a dice placement kind of cooperative game. I talked about it earlier, but there are so many dungeon crawls if you like fantasy, and really we are in a really cool golden age of cooperative games. Either you want something really heavy, like something like Spirit Island, which is very popular that I have not played, but I've heard really great things about it, or you want something on the lighter end like Horrified here. I think if you're looking for a game where you want to work together with your friends, I think there are a lot of great options out there. Let me know what your favorite cooperative game is, and do you have a go-to cooperative game you break out when you have people who don't play a lot of games? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you guys for watching. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing for more videos like this. I also have a Twitter and Instagram where I post thoughts and photos of games I'm playing throughout the week, and I hope to see you there. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.